the order you've brought in the House. Honorable Speaker, land ownership in Kenya and the world all over is a story that develops itself, and that old story may inform also our contributions on this particular motion. That actually originally the land ownership was defined by the first occupancy theory. This was based on the fact that those who occupy land first owned that particular land. The Kenyan situation is the same, because several tribes that occupied different areas were able to settle in those areas, and that became their land. So then, the Kenyan situation changes with colonization or the coming of the foreigners to this country. The first team to arrive was made up of the Arabs, the Persians, and that history goes on, and therefore they alienated part of the coastal land for their use. But I think when the Portuguese did arrive, they also did alienate a lot of land. But the worst injustices, Honorable Speaker, were then done by the British colonizers, who set in with what was called the land ordinances, beginning with the ones of 1894, coming to 1902. I think the most popularized is the 1915 one, which alienated the Maasai land and so on and so forth. I am coming close, Honorable Speaker, to the issue of land subdivision. So therefore, the Africans who originally would occupy any area and fight among each other for land occupation were now restricted to certain areas. And that set in the issue of land subdivision, which has continued. For those communities living in Western Kenya, where I come from, like Vihiga, and all the way to Kisii, where we have a lot of population, and even to where the two mover and second of the motion, Kitale areas are, and even Luoland, the population is very high and the land is very small. So that then raises the question of actually implementing the constitutional requirement that a minimum or an optimum minimum be required for the land that can be owned, and even a maximum one. And therefore, this motion is relevant. But for me, this motion allows us a chance, therefore, to actually look in the land policy issue currently as put by the Constitution of Kenya 2010 in its Article 40, which guarantees ownership of private land by any person, and is only limited by Article 65, which restricts maybe certain foreigners from owning land, and if they were to own it, they would own it on a lease of 99 years and thereof. And therefore, given the current circumstances where this country is reeling from hunger and starvation, and that agriculture becomes the core business, and I like the Kenya Kwanza policy, which now fronts agriculture as the core issue which must be undertaken to solve the issue of food in this country, then this motion becomes relevant. But as it becomes relevant, Honorable Speaker, it is important to address the issues of those small land owners who will then have to surrender their land in order for us to provide space for agrarian land. But I'm happy there's certain mitigations that can be undertaken. Honorable Speaker, why do people subdivide land into small pieces? Most of them do that in order to give a share to family members, and this is customary, Honorable Speaker. Others do it to give out land as gifts, while others sell it for profits. But others may even, private developers may subdivide land for the sake of value to sell it to other people. But I want to capture the first reason, to share it among the family as a matter of customary inheritance from the forefather to the father, and then father to son. This will have to be addressed so that the government can spare money, if there is such a fund, so that this land is bought from those families who will be paving way for land to get arable for it to be farmed. And then we resettle them through the good program that now the current government is carrying out on a housing scheme, which will actually guarantee every Kenyan a proper and decent housing for himself. If that happens, which is very good, like the mover did indicate in South Africa, then this will provide also a forum and easy means to make these many families who are clustered in the same place to access the social and other services they require, like water, electricity, and many other social services, even gas, which can be provided if families are living in the same place. But, Honorable Speaker, the big question is the arable land that is lying idle, and which is larger than the small lands that we could be targeting. The truth is that majority of the people with small lands are tilling it even 3 or 4 times a year, like in Western where I come from. We till land 4 times. There is the first digging, as we call it in local English, the second one, and even the third one. And therefore, it is fully utilized. The real challenge are the owners of the big chunks, whereas the mover was fearful to name them, but they are named everywhere. And you will notice that it's unfortunate that the political leaders are the ones who also own much land, with exception only number 5, who is a lady by the name Miceless Lie. Otherwise, we really need to bring land to taxation. Honorable Speaker, today I've been speaking to the task force or the presidential working team. And one thing that they are also dealing with is how to make sure that schools and education is sustainable. Education will only be sustainable if we have enough food for the children who are going to school. And therefore, we must bring to some form of taxation for the lands that are lying idle. In America, Honorable Speaker, education is actually paid for by property tax, specifically property tax, and mainly land tax. Those who own land and they are not using it are taxed. Other forms of property are taxed, and that is the money that is raised to fully fund education in Kenya. This motion, Honorable Speaker, for me it opens a way whereby we can easily discuss a bill that levies tax on idle land to fund education in this country. Because CBC is really killing the parents in the countryside because of the cost of education. Remember, education is supposedly in the Constitution supposed to be not only free, but compulsory. But the government is struggling to fund education because of the limited resources. If we did a tax specifically on property and more so land, this would be the area to get the money to fund education. Otherwise, the owners of this land must be forced to actually till it or lease it so that it is still for production of food, which is now a challenge in this particular country. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, I find this motion very good, coming timely, but must be expanded beyond the railings of imagining that the smallholders are the ones who really need to be dealt with. But the truth is that the real challenge lies with the maximum amount of money that one individual should be owning in this country. And how is he using it? Is it lying idle for prospection or for to sell, or it is doing something? Honorable Speaker, I support this motion and thank Honorable Wanyonyi for thinking this way. But he must remember that the cultural practices of the Luigas, where you have to receive, and many other communities in this country, where you must receive some land from your father, are not completely killed. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
The Honorable Member for Kilgoris.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you for this opportunity. And the motion is brought by a good friend of mine,